Hello everybody, welcome back. Today we're making the Foliage Mugrug, a round mug rug. So this should be fun. Let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we want to do today is cut out these two templates and tape them together. This is going to give us the placement for all of our raw edge applique. Today I'm going to be using Heat and Bond Light to do my applique. You can use whatever type of fusible that you like using. And if you're using freezer paper, you'll want to trace your templates from the back side of the page. You're going to need 4 of the larger leaves and 4 of the smaller leaves. Once you get those traced, you can separate them and bring them over to the iron. We're going to fuse all of these pieces to the back side of the fabric we want to cut our leaves from. And if you don't want to stitch down your leaves, try using the Heat and Bond in the red package. That is a permanent adhesive and you don't have to stitch any of your applique. Now we're going to bring in the fabric we want to use as the top of our mug rug. You can use a heat erasing pen or water soluble pen and a light pad or a window if you can't see through your fabric. I'm using kind of a lighter fabric for the top of my mug rug, so I just layered the template underneath. And I'm using the template that I can see pretty well to position each one of the leaves. And at this point, I'm just tacking them down with the iron. The paper, when heated up, wants to curl up a little bit. So I'm just going to tack down these leaves. You see one falls off. Let's line that back up and tack down that last leaf. And then we can remove that template and finish fusing all of these leaves down. Once they're all good and fused, I'm going to flip this over and use a heat erasing pen and trace the outline shape just using that template to line the leaves back up. You can see it just a little bit. That'll center those leaves right in that circle. And I'm going to trace the outline of the circle with a heat erasing pen. This is going to be our stitch line for the shape of our mug rug. You could also use the paper template pinned in place if that is easier for you to stitch along the side. I'm going to make sure to mark a little opening so we don't forget to put that in there. Then we're going to go over, we're going to create the layers of our mug rug by putting our batting down first, our backing fabric facing up, and the top of our mug rug facing down. And we're going to throw some pins in this and bring it over to the sewing machine. I'm going to start at the little opening that I drew on there, and I'm going to do a back stitch, and then we are stitching on the line that we traced from the template. Again, you could have just pinned your paper template to the top and just stitched right around your paper template. I'm using a little bit of a shorter stitch length. I lowered my stitch length to a 2.2 on my Juki. Just gives a little bit of a tighter, smoother, curved seam all the way around. And at this point, I have not stitched down my applique yet. Now, if you want to, you could have stitched down your applique before creating the layers. And if you're using a satin stitch, you might want to use a stabilizer like a tearaway to keep that top fabric from puckering, and then create your layers. So now that we've sewn all the way around our circle, leaving that opening, I'm going to trim all this extra batting and backing fabric away. And today I'm going to use my pinking shears right close to that stitch line all the way around. Cutting through a layer of batting and 2 layers of fabric, so it's a little bit stiff, but the pinking shears will help give a nice curved edge all the way around. Now I'm going to bring this over to the iron because we want to get a nice curve where this opening is. And I just cut that seam and cut away some of the extra. And I'm going to use the paper template lined up to our stitch line and a little bit of spray starch. That spray starch wets the fabric a little bit, and you're able to fold over that opening and give that a press. And so when we turn this right side out, the opening will have a nice curved edge to it. I'll cut away some of the batting on the back, and we'll do the same thing for the back fabric. We're going to give that a nice curve in that opening. We're going to just dry that starch with our iron, and that'll help keep that shape nice and curved. Once we've pressed that starch dry, we're going to turn this right side out. If you've used freezer paper for your applique, be extra careful. The freezer paper method of applique, your fabric tends to fray a little bit easier. So just be extra careful when turning this right side out. And I like to just push out that seam with my fingers, flatten everything down, and bring this over to the iron. We're going to press this nice and flat before we bring it over to the sewing machine. Now, one thing I did forget to do was turn on the camera when I stitch, but you want to stitch all the way around the edge, right close to that edge. That'll close up our opening and give a nice finish to our mug rug. For the applique, you'll see I've put on my free motion foot. Of course, you could stitch down your applique with any type of stitch that you would like to do. Today, I'm going to just use a straight stitch with my free motion foot. I think a blanket stitch would look nice, a zigzag stitch, even a satin stitch. But for me, it's a lot faster to go through with my free motion foot. And I'm just stitching right close to that raw edge on each of my leaves. I'll bring you along as I do that. In the background of this mug rug, I'm just going to do a small little meandering stitch. It is a tiny, tiny meandering stitch just to quilt that background, sort of puff up those leaves just a little bit. I'm using a pretty thin batting today, the Warm and Natural cotton batting, so my leaves don't get real puffy, but it'll help the background shrink down a little bit and puff those leaves up a little bit. Now, y'all, there are so many different variations you could do with this pattern. Before you created your layers, you could take some DMC thread and stitch in some veins in your leaves. That would be so pretty. You could also hand quilt this if you wanted to with some DMC thread. Make little stems for your leaves, the veins in your leaves. I think that would be really pretty. You could use a contrasting thread when you're stitching down your leaves, just as another decoration element of your mug rug. A lot of the times I wait to stitch down my applique until this part, because stitching down the applique also serves as part of our quilting. So you're kind of knocking out two things at one time. I really like this smaller little meandering stitch to fill in smaller background areas. I think you could really get elaborate as you want to, or keep it just super simple with the quilting. Either way would be really pretty. You'll see sometimes I have to jump around. Sometimes when I'm quilting in background areas, I sort of close myself in and then I have to jump to finish filling in other areas. This is a really good background filler, something that would be really fun to sit down and practice with. And I'm just quilting right up to that stitch line where we stitched around the edge. And then I'm going to come in and just do some straight lines as the veins of my leaves. I know one thing, I have missed going live with you each week. I will see you next week. Next week we will be back and I will be live on Friday, so I'm really looking forward to that. I've missed talking with each of you during that time. I think we all look forward to just having some time to catch up and break up our week with some friends and some creative fun. Now, because I'm using a thread that just really blends in, it blends into the background and it pretty much blends into the leaves. I've decided to bring in a fabric marker and create some veins in my leaves. So I'm using a Marvy fabric marker. And I'm just going to add some stems to the leaves. This is the shortcut. You could do this with some DMC thread. Even before you create your layers, I think that would be pretty amazing. But this is also an easy way to create some details in your projects, especially if you're like me and you don't do too much hand stitching. And I think that was perfect. You can see the quilting on the back side. Isn't that pretty? Yes, I love that. And here is the front. So I've enjoyed making this mug rug with you. And as always, share pictures over on Creative Crew. If you make this, I'd love to see it. Just yet another gift idea. We have Christmas coming up in just a couple months. And I hope you have fun making this. We'll see you all next week for our live on Friday. Bye, everybody.